Xenoblade 2 has finally been upgraded after nearly a decade, and considering the franchise has had a pretty shaky track record lately, let's just cut right to the chase. Is the Switch 2 edition for Xenoblade 2 worth all of the hype, the extra $10, and the extra 30 gigabytes? And there's no better stress test than the factory from Chapter 4. Switch 1 has a lot of slowdown from how utterly compact this area is, and thankfully, the Switch 2 was able to stabilize it without the need of an upgrade. Now, will that remain true once we double the frame rate? Kind of, for the most part. There is a little bit of slowdown here and there, but honestly, I'm not too bothered by that. If anything, it just emphasizes how much action is going on without ever truly becoming distracting. So to me, it passes the test. But of course, Xenoblade is much more well known for its gigantic exteriors, so let's take a trip to Torna. Funny thing is, I personally never experienced that much slowdown in Torna, even on Switch 1. But I do know it can be somewhat notorious in the community. So will the Switch 2 edition clear its name once and for all? Kind of, for the most part. There is the occasional stutter, and certain parts of town like this little alleyway definitely has its slowdown. In fact, you might as well copy and paste that answer for the entire game. Pretty much all of the busier areas, be it the fields of Gormott or the Argentum trade guild, all of them are subject to minor frame pacing issues and rare moments of slowdown. This even applies to the cutscenes and menus, which honestly is way more jarring to me. Yeah, I don't know what it is about the turning animation, but it makes the game reset back to 30 frames for a few seconds. It's really strange. Now, to be clear, these are minuscule gripes compared to the original Switch 1 experience, but they're most definitely similar to Xenoblade 1's Switch 2 edition. Yeah, remember how everybody dogpiled on Xenoblade X? Well, Xenoblade 1 is arguably worse once you get past all the memes. It depends on who you are though. Some people are more picky about frame rate, some people even get nauseous when it's inconsistent, while others will barely notice a problem at all. Evidently, I for one am not an expert at these things, but I do very much notice the issues here, and I'm very disappointed that they exist. Does that mean I regret this purchase? Does that mean I wouldn't recommend it? No, not by any means. The frame rate is just stable enough to feel smooth, and most of all, the enhanced resolution is a game changer. It might not be a true 4K display, but I don't care, man. I'm looking at this game different. I've always thought it was beautiful despite everything, but now I sincerely believe this is one of the best looking Switch 2 games. I'm not even kidding. Gormott looks so much more lush in its greenery. You can feel the history and the improved textures in Torna. Uraya is obviously a sight to behold. Again, I am not an expert, and I'm not saying it's perfect. For instance, there are a few times in Gormott where I thought it looked a little blurry, but I tell you, there was a genuine moment where I looked up at the sky in Torna and just appreciated the colors. I've never done that before. I've never realized how pretty that particular section in the sky was. That's how delightful it is to finally have a better resolution. I've beaten this game like 10 times, and I continue to find new things to appreciate. It really is a special feeling. And have no fear, handheld mode is in good hands, one might say. Quite frankly, it was already good after the handheld boost mode. We really have come a long way since the notoriously bad original Switch version on handhelds. Now, we're looking so good. Might not be the crispiest resolution, but I promise you, if you are a handheld user like myself, you're going to be having a great time. This is the absolute prime of Xenoblade 2 on handheld. Now, I should acknowledge the pop-in both gameplay and cutscenes. It is still noticeable each and every time it happens, but at the very least, they did fix the most egregious pop-in. Whenever you would fast travel to a new Titan, the textures would take nearly 10 seconds to load. This was the case on both Switch 1 and Switch 2. But with this new Switch 2 edition, everything loads at once. I tried it in a few different areas, and to no avail, it successfully loaded like a normal video game. In all seriousness though, the load times as a whole are improved across the board. This is probably the only time that I will say that there is no asterisk here. There's no potential concerns. In just about every way that I could measure it, this Switch 2 edition is faster, no doubts about it. Alright, it's time to talk about it. It's the biggest news of this release. The last 24 hours have been an emotional roller coaster. We were all riding the high of discovering there was quality of life in Xenoblade 2 Switch 2 Edition. I most certainly was in that last video I made. But for better or worse, it is time for a reality check. First and foremost, yes, field skills no longer have to be equipped in order to activate. This is the simplest, yet greatest improvement they could have made to Xenoblade 2's gameplay. Especially in the optional parts of the game when you're doing field skills left and right. You no longer have to go through the menus every single time. But for us nerds out there, that begs the question, is it counting literally every blade you have, or is it taking into account the maximum number of blades in the party? Because obviously, as the player, you can't bring every blade with you. And in order to test this, I intentionally fail a field check where supposedly I am currently holding 4 Water Mastery and 2 Fortitude. But here's the problem with that. At this point in the game, I cannot equip 3 blades yet. Rex and Nia are the only ones who can equip an additional blade, meaning there are only 2 additional blades to work with here. And there is currently no combination of 2 blades that can get me to both 4 Water Mastery and 2 Fortitude. I can get to 4 Water Mastery, I can get to 2 Fortitude, but not at the same time, not in the same party. So yes, the Switch 2 edition counts every blade even if they cannot be equipped. This would literally be impossible in the original version of Xenoblade 2. But that's not the only improvement relating to field skills. The gathering animation has been sped up dramatically. It was instantly noticeable to me. Whether or not a field skill activates, collection points have become an absolute breeze. The same can be said for barrels and treasure chests, by the way. They clearly wanted to retain a nice pace to the exploration, which is why I'm confused that they didn't go all the way. You see, field checks weren't the only time you had to rummage through the menus. It was also any time you progressed a blade's affinity chart. Despite the notification, you have not actually unlocked a skill until you have deliberately opened the affinity chart. It's one of the more subtle growing pains, but considering their goal was to specifically reduce the menuing with field skills, this feels like a massive oversight. But that isn't even close to the biggest missed opportunity, the brand new mode, Merc Assault. I've got no qualms with the mode itself. I fear it's mostly a novelty, but I can't deny it's cool. After all, the fandom has always dreamt about playing as these blades directly. I will say though, as chaotic as it is, what's really throwing me off is having an actual button to attack instead of auto-attacking. Some say this is an experiment for Genesis, and if so, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a promising one. Anyway, the good news about Merc Assault is that it isn't its own thing. It serves as an alternative to Merc missions. Instead of this being a solely passive mechanic, you now have the option to either clear the mission yourself via Merc Assault, or run the timer in the background as usual. The bad news, the so bad it's funny news, is that this only applies to the blue missions, not the pink ones. You know, the ones that matter, the ones that push your patience to the limit, the ones we all joke and vent about. look, I sort of understand why Merc Assault is intended to be a mode that you can play over and over for fun. Unlike the blue missions, the pink missions are not repeatable because they're typically a part of a main or side quest. This is still a net positive in the end. Those blue missions can run up to hours, so being able to clear them as quickly as 5 minutes is quite the luxury. But come on, you've got to admit, it's funny. It's funny how much that sucks. It's funny how close we got to a perfect solution, but instead, it kinda sucks. But hey, maybe they finally made it so that Merc missions are based on real-world time instead of forcing you to keep the game open. No, of course not. Those are the two most notable quality of life improvements, but there's a couple of smaller additions that are very much appreciated. The system menu has two new functions, one of them a simple button to return to the title screen instead of having to reboot. The second is an amiibo feature. Most of the bonuses are standard, like collectibles or weapon points, but of course, this is the most useful for unlocking the new Pyra and Mythra outfits. I've gotta be honest, I was feeling lukewarm when they were revealed in the overview trailer, but seeing them in-game has me looking like a fool. They are such striking designs, especially at nighttime or in an indoor area. I guess there is a reason their announcement tweet got more likes than the Genesis trailer. Jokes aside, they'll make for some gorgeous photos using another new feature. Press L and R at the same time to take a screenshot without the UI. Not quite the photo mode of my dreams, but it'll have to do. And while we're at it, we can finally take video clips just like a normal Switch game. Yeah, for whatever reason, this was disabled in the vanilla Xenoblade 2. But most of all, perhaps my favorite besides the field skills, the cutscenes will sporadically feature HD Rumble. I'm not kidding, for the record, I think it greatly enhances the action sequences and especially the comic relief. I was literally re-watching cutscenes just to feel the funny rumble. Now it's important to keep in mind that there may be more discrepancies that aren't perceptible at face value. I like to use Charla's new boob window as an example because it's hilarious, but truly, there are some things we just won't know for a while. That does sadly go for bugs. The most common I've seen reported are the New Game Plus third accessory slot disappearing, the weapon points being way higher than they should be, and most egregious of all, the combat music being drowned out by sound effects even if you turn it up to maximum in the settings. I really don't know how that one made it past QA. Surely someone noticed, right? But it goes both ways. We might also find some good things, like if there are any changes to the Gacha formula, we will have zero clue until the fandom data mines it or Nintendo comes out and says it themselves. So as far as we know, right now, at this moment, that's pretty much every quality of life in this Switch 2 edition. Which may be a disappointment because there are about a handful of humongous elephants in the room. Even after an upgrade, 9 years later, Xenoblade 2 remains the only Xenoblade game without a proper tutorial menu, without a streamlined navigation system, without multiple save files, and even without autosave. These all could have been easy slam dunks. I would even argue that the tutorials and navigation would have been much more important than the field skill change. And don't get me wrong, I am not one of those people who would only consider this Switch 2 edition to be a success if it were anywhere near on par with a definitive edition. No, I didn't need a redub, or a re-lip sync, or redesign, or any type of redo. But what has me befuddled, what I just can't let go here, is everything that was improved is kind of half-assed. Not by mistake or neglect, like half-assed on purpose. We're going to make field skills less cumbersome with menus, but we'll still make you open several menus to unlock them. We're going to make Merc missions much faster than they've ever been, except for all the ones you actually care about. We're going to add a new tutorial menu that is well integrated into the context of the story, but only for Merc Assault and nothing actually important. The decisions to change this, but then not change that, is so baffling to me that the only conceivable reason I can muster is there will be a definitive edition someday, and the more they leave on the table for it, the more we'll be likely to buy it. Because now we're in an awkward situation, right? The definitive editions have been traditionally released a decade after the original. Well, next year is a decade after Xenoblade 2, but that happens to be the same year as Xenoblade Genesis, and more importantly, only 1 year after the Switch 2 edition. Even if they did wait until 2027 or 28, that still feels weird to me. I mean, I guess it'd be weirder if this was the only game that didn't get a Switch 2 edition. I don't know, I'm going back and forth on this. It's as if Monolith Soft was trying to throw a bone to Xenoblade 2 fans, when really all they did was prove we could have gotten a whole meal. They just chose not to give it. Hey, maybe I'm being too cynical. Maybe in a few years we'll look back at this and call it a scrumptious appetizer, but until then, it's a good Switch 2 edition. Even if the frame rate isn't perfect and the quality of life is weird, the enhanced visuals and the major field skill change are enough of an upgrade alone. To have new gameplay content alongside that is merely the cherry on top. Alright, that's enough food analogies. Can you tell I wrote this while starving? I've been so busy I haven't had time to check out the free Torna upgrade, or even the MOMO Blade Quest. Yes, I'm sorry Xenosaga fans, I don't know her, so she was not a high priority. But to end on a lighter note, I wanted to quickly share my midnight launch experience. Despite pre-ordering this upgrade and having it downloaded an entire week in advance, Nintendo would not let me in. It didn't matter if I had done everything correct. I checked the eShop, I checked the virtual card settings, I checked the internet to see if anyone else has had this problem, I checked myself if I had the will to re-download 30 gigabytes, I even took out my cartridge and put it back in. But what I didn't do was this. Fuck it. I swear to God if that worked. What the fuck? What are you talking about? Good times. And I hope you're having a good time with Xenoblade 2 Switch 2 Edition. I hope you're having as much of a good time as Tetsuya Takahashi spamming those Pyra and Mythra plush dolls on Twitter he allegedly has no intentions on selling, except instead of doing that, you're having a good time with Xenoblade 2. You're having a good time being good to others and having yourself a good day. Bye-bye.